Right, good morning everybody. My name is John Furlong from the University of Oxford, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this important conference on the challenges and trends of e-education. I'm afraid I'm not able to be with you today, but I'm very pleased to say that two of my colleagues from Oxford are going to be with you. One is Niall Winters, who is an Associate Professor of Learning and New Technologies in the Department of Education in Oxford, where I used to work. And the other is Adrian Bullock, who is the Director of International Affairs at the Oxford International Centre for Publishing Studies. In addition, we have a number of local colleagues as well. We have Michelle Ho, who is a curriculum consultant to various schools in Hong Kong. And of course, most important of all, we have Eric Hui, who is the founder and chief executive of the Enhanced Holistic Learning Academy, EHLA. And they're all going to be talking to you about different aspects to do with our topic, challenges and trends in e-education. Now, e-education is something that's been of interest of mine for many, many years. I seem to remember almost 40 years ago writing undergraduate essays about the potentialities of learning machines. They're very simple devices. They would introduce a text to a learner, and they'd be followed by a number of different closed questions, and the learner simply had to tick the right box. And if they got the right answer, a bell would ring, or they'd get some points, or some American ones would even give children candy if they got the learning right. And the idea was that by being rewarded, this is simple behaviourist principles, if by being rewarded somehow learning would take place. It didn't work. And what's been interesting in the 40 years ever since is that though there have been many, many different developments in e-education, actually not many of them have really been very effective compared with other sectors of our lives which have been transformed by new technologies. Learning has actually been much more difficult to make any real headway in terms of trying to think about how we effectively harness those technologies to support learning. I think there are three different dimensions, three different moments in thinking about e-education, all of which contribute to the development of effective programs. The first one is the technical dimension, the ideas and forms of innovation that are actually affecting the way in which we program our computers. There are some very interesting developments going on at the moment, where we are able through, actually for the first time, to capitalise on the huge amounts of data that can be generated when people go through learning programmes of different sorts, and how that can be then fed back so that we can actually adapt what it is they're doing to their particular learning needs. There's a real potentiality at last to make programmes that people are engaging with highly individual, and that's a very important technological development. But technology alone is not all that's needed. If we're going to have effective systems, we also need to recognise that there should be a pedagogical moment as well. We need to recognise that how you learn is actually a very complex process, much more complex than those simple behaviourist principles that I talked about under the old teaching machines. We also need to understand that learning varies, pedagogical principles vary subject by subject, topic by topic. So the sorts of principles that you need in devising programs, if you are thinking about developing a program to support language learning, will be different from the sorts of principles that are needed to underpin programs in science education or mathematics education. And too often in the past, e-education has been simply seen as a matter of applying the technology to any learning context. It's vitally important that we take seriously the pedagogical dimensions and engage people who are experts in teaching particular subjects and areas of study, engaging them in the development process itself. So there is a technological moment, there's a pedagogical moment, but there is also a social moment. Some of my own research in this area was looking at how young people took learning to learn at home, and the way in which it became a social issue when they took that technology. And we see computers as simply engaging with an individual, one at a time. The reality is, when we started to study how they were being used at home, that was very, very far from the truth. They were immensely social contexts. So although engaged with the computer, young people were also talking to their brothers, their sisters, their parents, their friends, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes online. And this was transforming the way in which they engaged with that material. Of course, when those technologies are taken into the classroom, they're a social context of a very different sort, but also incredibly powerful, because here we see the role of the teacher engaging with particular programs and supporting students in different ways. And it may be that new programs are going to actually ask something very different of teachers in the future if they're going to support them effectively. That is a really, really important dimension that no developer has really taken seriously, I don't think, to date. And what is interesting in looking at the work that EHLA has been doing over the last 2 or 3 years has been to see how they've been engaging with each of these different moments very seriously. They have been able to capitalise on the new programming developments that are allowing them to develop software that will provide a very individualised approach to supporting learning. But at the same time, they've also developed programs by engaging pedagogical experts. And I'm sure Aidan will be talking about his work in supporting the development of materials for teaching language. And there are other panels around the world, other groups of people around the world who are working on developments in science and mathematics learning as well. That's very welcome. Now the materials are available, now is the time to start thinking about the social dimension, how they're going to impact in the classroom and how they can be most effectively supported. And that's, of course, where you all come in, because you need to be engaged, we hope, in some ways in thinking these things through with EHLA as they move forward, to ask those social questions about the ways in which these materials can be most effectively supported. So, a lot to discuss. I say I'm really sorry I'm not able to be with you today, because I think this is a very important event. But I'm sure with the stimulating input you're going to be having, there'll be lots of time for very, very exciting discussion, and I hope you all have a very rewarding and enjoyable day. Thank you very much indeed.